This person fell in love with you, even with the age diff. God wants you to listen this now. There is a reason this message found you today, and before you scroll away, listen closely because something about these words may feel strangely familiar. Deep down, you have sensed a connection that never followed the usual rules, a feeling that appeared quietly and refused to disappear. Maybe you tried to explain it away. Maybe you told yourself it could not be real because of circumstances, expectations, or the difference in years between you and this person. Yet the heart has a way of noticing what the mind spends months trying to ignore. Stay with this, because there is something important here. What makes this connection unusual is not the age difference itself. It is the way this person sees you. While others notice surface details, they notice the parts of you that rarely get attention. They remember small things you have forgotten mentioning. They pay attention when you speak, even when everyone else seems distracted. Somewhere along the way, admiration became affection, and affection slowly became something much deeper. It did not happen overnight. It happened through quiet moments, shared energy, and an emotional understanding that neither of you expected. What surprised them most was not that they liked you. What surprised them was how impossible it became to stop thinking about you. For a long time, this person questioned their own feelings. They wondered if they were imagining things. They asked themselves whether the connection made sense. They compared logic against emotion and found themselves caught in the middle. Yet every time they tried to step back, something pulled their attention toward you again. Not because of appearance alone, not because of fantasy, but because your presence brought a sense of comfort they could not easily explain. There are people we meet who entertain us, and then there are people who change the atmosphere of a room simply by being there. To then, you became that person. And perhaps the most meaningful part is that this connection has encouraged growth within both of you, even if neither of you fully realized it yet. Sometimes life places certain people in our path, not to create confusion, but to reveal parts of ourselves that have been waiting to be seen. This person began looking at life differently after meeting you. They became more honest with themselves, more aware of what truly matters. The age difference may have been the first thing they noticed, but it was never the thing that stayed in their heart. What stayed was your spirit, your kindness, your strength, and the feeling that somehow, in a world full of strangers, you felt unexpectedly familiar. And what comes next may reveal even more about why this connection feels impossible to forget. Some connections do not arrive with noise or certainty. They arrive quietly, almost unnoticed at first, and then one day you realize they have taken up space in your thoughts without asking permission. That is what happened here. This person never planned to feel this way. They were living their life, following their routines, carrying their own worries and responsibilities, when somehow your presence began showing up in places where it should not have been. A random moment would remind them of you. A conversation would make them wonder what your opinion might be. A song, a memory, even an ordinary afternoon would suddenly feel connected to someone they could not stop thinking about. Don't miss what comes next, because this is where their feelings became impossible to ignore. The truth is that they spent a long time hiding these emotions from themselves, not because the feelings were weak, but because they were strong enough to change the way they saw their future. There was hesitation. There were questions. There were moments when they convinced themselves that keeping emotional distance would be easier. Yet every attempt to create that distance only made them realize how much your presence mattered. What they admired was not perfection, it was authenticity. In a world where so many people wear masks, you carried something genuine. Even your imperfections felt real, and that honesty became one of the reasons they felt drawn toward you. They began recognizing a kind of peace in your energy that they struggled to find anywhere else. What makes this story meaningful is that much of it happened in silence. While others may have noticed nothing unusual, this person was going through an internal transformation. They were learning that genuine affection often grows differently than people expect. It is not always dramatic. It is not always loud. Sometimes it develops through respect, understanding, and a feeling of emotional safety. They started paying attention to the way you handled challenges, the way you treated people, and the strength you carried even during difficult moments. The more they observed, the more their admiration deepened. Somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing you as just another person in their life and began seeing you as someone whose happiness genuinely mattered to them. There is also something beautiful about the timing of all this, not because everything is perfectly aligned, but because both of you have been growing in ways that prepared you to recognize deeper connections. Life often teaches lessons through patience, and this connection seems to carry that quiet wisdom. Instead of rushing, it unfolded slowly enough for emotions to develop roots. That is why it feels different. It is not built on excitement alone, it is built on understanding. And whether you have already sensed this energy, or are only beginning to notice it now, there is a reason it feels so difficult to dismiss. Beneath the questions and uncertainty is a bond that continues to ask for attention, not through pressure, but through the simple truth that some feelings remain present because they have something important to teach us about ourselves. Have you ever noticed how certain people seem to leave a mark on your heart without even trying? Not because they demanded attention, but because something about their presence felt honest, familiar, and unexpectedly comforting. That is the space you began to occupy in this person's world. What started as curiosity slowly turned into appreciation, and appreciation became something far more meaningful. They found themselves looking forward to moments that involved you, even the smallest ones. A simple conversation could stay in their mind for days. A shared laugh could brighten an entire week. Without realizing it, they had begun measuring certain moments of happiness by whether you were part of them. What made this even more confusing for them was the realization that these feelings continued growing despite every reason they thought they should not. They tried to be practical. They reminded themselves about differences, circumstances, and expectations. Yet emotions do not always follow the paths that logic creates. The more they focused on what separated you, the more they discovered what connected you. They saw a depth in you that many people never take the time to understand. They noticed your resilience when life became challenging. They noticed your compassion when nobody was watching. And they noticed the quiet strength you carried through situations that could have easily broken someone else. Those observations became the foundation of something they could no longer dismiss. There were moments when they wondered whether you had any idea what was happening inside their heart. Sometimes they felt certain you could sense it. Other times they believed they had hidden everything perfectly. Yet regardless of what you knew or did not know, their feelings continued evolving. They were no longer based on imagination or wishful thinking. They were rooted in genuine respect. That is why this connection feels different from passing attraction. Attraction can appear quickly and disappear just as fast. What they experienced was slower, steadier, and far more personal. It became tied to who you are rather than what you represent. Stay with this, because there is something important here. The strongest feelings are often the ones that grow quietly before anyone fully understands their significance. And perhaps that is where the deeper message begins to reveal itself. Some people enter our lives to teach us lessons, while others arrive to remind us that meaningful connections can appear in unexpected forms. This person's heart was not captured by numbers, expectations, or outside opinions. It was moved by the way you made them feel seen, understood, and inspired. Whether they admitted it openly or carried it silently, the truth remained the same. Every day that passed gave them another reason to appreciate your presence. And while they may still be sorting through their emotions, one thing has become impossible for them to deny. Meeting you changed something inside them. It awakened feelings they never expected, and those feelings continue growing stronger each time they remember the impact you have had on their life. What makes this story so powerful is that neither of you may have fully understood what was unfolding while it was happening. Life has a way of revealing important things gradually, and sometimes the most meaningful emotions develop in the background, while everyday moments continue moving forward. This person did not wake up one morning suddenly in love. Instead, it happened through countless small realizations. They began noticing that your opinion mattered more than they expected. Your happiness affected their mood. Your struggles stayed in their thoughts long after conversations ended. Piece by piece, without fanfare or dramatic declarations, their heart began building a place where thoughts of you naturally belonged. As these feelings deepened, they also began seeing themselves differently. There was something about your presence that encouraged honesty. Around you, they felt less interested in pretending and more interested in being genuine. That kind of connection is rare. Many relationships are built on impressions, but the strongest bonds are often built on authenticity. They felt understood in ways they had not experienced before. Even when you were not discussing anything extraordinary, there was a comfort in simply being connected to your energy. The age difference that once seemed so significant slowly became less important compared to the emotional understanding that continued growing between you. What remained was not a focus on years, but a focus on the way your souls seemed to recognize something valuable in one another. There were nights when they sat quietly with their thoughts, wondering why this connection felt different from anything they had experienced before. They could not easily explain it to themselves, let alone to anyone else. The feeling was deeper than excitement and calmer than obsession. It felt like finding a chapter of life they had not known they were searching for. They began realizing that meaningful affection is not always about finding someone who looks perfect on paper. Sometimes it is about finding someone who brings out a better version of who you already are. Every interaction, every memory, every shared moment became another thread woven into a connection that felt increasingly difficult to ignore. Don't miss what comes next, because the heart of this message is beginning to reveal itself. The deeper truth is that this person never fell in love with an idea. They fell in love with a real human being. They fell in love with your character, your perspective, your quiet strengths, and even the parts of you that you sometimes question yourself. They saw beauty in places you may overlook. They noticed qualities you may take for granted. And as time passed, their feelings became less about uncertainty and more about appreciation. Somewhere inside them, a realization settled gently into place. Meeting you was not an interruption in their journey. It became an important part of it. And the more they reflected on everything that had changed since you entered their life, the more they understood that some connections arrive for a reason that goes far beyond what the eye can immediately see. There comes a moment in every meaningful connection when the heart stops asking whether the feeling is real and starts accepting that it is. That moment may not happen all at once. It may arrive quietly during an ordinary day, while reflecting on memories, or while noticing how often one person continues appearing in your thoughts. This person reached that moment more than once. Every attempt to explain away their emotions eventually led them back to the same truth. No matter how carefully they examined the situation, no matter how many practical questions they asked themselves, the feeling remained. It was steady, it was sincere, and it carried a depth that could not be reduced to simple attraction or passing curiosity. What surprised them most was how naturally their heart began imagining your happiness. They found themselves hoping good things would come your way. They wanted to see you succeed, heal, grow, and experience joy. Genuine love often reveals itself through that simple shift. It becomes less focused on what we receive and more focused on what we wish for another person. This person began carrying that kind of care for you, not because they felt obligated, but because it emerged naturally from the respect and admiration they had developed. There is something important here. The strongest emotional connections often begin when someone starts valuing your well-being as much as their own feelings. At the same time, they learned that meaningful connections require patience. Some emotions cannot be rushed, forced, or perfectly explained. They unfold according to their own rhythm. Through that process, they discovered a quiet confidence growing within themselves. Instead of focusing on obstacles, they began appreciating the connection for what it was. Instead of constantly questioning every feeling, they allowed themselves to acknowledge what their heart had already understood. They realized that the most beautiful parts of this bond were not dramatic moments. They were the simple experiences of feeling understood, appreciated, and emotionally connected to someone whose presence brought warmth into their life. Those moments became the foundation of everything they felt, and perhaps that is why this message found you today. Not to create pressure, not to promise anything beyond what is real, but to remind you that meaningful feelings often grow in places where people least expect them. Sometimes life brings two people together who help each other see the world differently. Sometimes one connection becomes a mirror that reflects strengths, kindness, and possibilities that had gone unnoticed before. This person's feelings were never truly about the age difference. They were about the person standing beyond it. They were about you, about the impact you made without trying, about the comfort, inspiration, and understanding that grew naturally between two hearts. And as this story continues toward its final chapter, one truth remains clear. Some connections become unforgettable not because they are perfect, but because they are genuine. Sometimes the most important realization is not that someone loves you. It is understanding why that love was able to grow in the first place. As this journey reaches its final chapter, take a quiet moment and reflect on everything you have heard. This was never a story about circumstances, expectations, or differences. It was a story about connection. A connection that developed through understanding, respect, patience, and the simple experience of two lives crossing paths at exactly the right moment to leave a lasting impression. Long before emotions were fully understood, something meaningful had already begun taking shape beneath the surface. The person who fell in love with you did not discover perfection. They discovered authenticity. They saw someone who continued moving forward despite challenges. Someone who carried kindness without needing recognition for it. Someone who possessed a quiet strength that revealed itself in everyday moments. What touched their heart most was not a single conversation or memory. It was the collection of countless small things that made you uniquely you. Over time, those moments created a picture they could not forget, and the more clearly they saw who you truly were, the more grateful they became that life had given them the opportunity to know you at all. There is a gentle spiritual lesson hidden within all of this. Sometimes the people who enter our lives are not there to teach us about romance alone. They are there to teach us about value. They remind us that we are seen more deeply than we realize. They help us recognize qualities within ourselves that we may have overlooked for years. Whether this connection continues growing, transforms into something new, or simply remains an important chapter in both of your lives, its meaning is not measured by outcomes. Its meaning is measured by the growth, understanding, and appreciation it awakened. The fact that someone could look beyond every surface detail and connect with the person you truly are is a reminder of how powerful genuine human connection can be. So if this message feels like it was meant for you, let it leave you with peace rather than questions. Let it remind you that the qualities that matter most are often the ones that cannot be seen at first glance. You do not have to chase certainty. You do not have to force answers. Simply carry forward the knowledge that your presence has touched someone's life in a meaningful way. Sometimes that alone is a beautiful thing. And as you continue your own path, may you remember this. The connections that stay with us the longest are rarely built on appearances or expectations. They are built on understanding, sincerity, and the quiet recognition of one heart meeting another. In the end, that is what makes a connection truly unforgettable.